Hello, everyone. That beautiful tune is called Welcome. The composer is O'Carolan. The dance is Songs of the Harpist. The choreographer is Fritz Demitz Herman. It's from 1998. The band is MGM. The musicians are Mary Lee, Jean Murrow, and Margaret Ann Martin. CD, Measured Obsession, and where to buy? At the CDSS bookstore. That's a great place to buy it. It's nice to have you here and our guest, Jean. We're going to do a few starting off things before we bring up Jean to talk to us. But I wanted to let you know we are the Historical Tea and Dance Society, and I am Darlene Hamilton, and on our team we have Lindsay Verbal assisting with the program, handling media and our attendee questions. She come? Lindsay? Okay. Well, she must be busy. That's okay. She'll be up in a minute. I know. On Zoom, in the background, we have Renee Turner. The fabulous Renee Turner. We're so happy to have her with us. Looking wonderful. And then on Facebook Live, we have Larry Hansen. Renee and Larry. Whoops, am I getting feedback? Great. And there's Lindsay. Hi, Larry. Larry and Renee are handling all your questions and comments and posting on Facebook and Zoom. So we hope you will feel free to ask questions. You know, that is a really wonderful part of this whole evening. So please don't be shy about that, and please do ask questions. And thank you so much, both of you, for being here. And let me introduce the fabulous Lindsay Verbal, who handles our media and questions and everything behind the scenes. Hugs to my team. I love my team. All right, let's see, what else? Oh, very important, the after talk. If we don't get to your questions and things you were curious about here in the web chat, we are going to bring them up in the after talk, and that link will be posted at the end, or if you registered, you've already gotten it in the email that went out to you. So, you know, just keep that handy or wait till the end and grab it and join it, which starts about a minute or two after this program ends. And of course, we always want to give a thank you shout out to Karen Axelrod and friends for her concert every Tuesday live on Facebook. It's so fabulous. And I loved seeing her kitty at the end. I was sneaking peeks even though I wasn't listening. So, cute kitty. All right, let me go into a bio about the fabulous Jean. Everybody's fabulous tonight, I know. Jean Murrow. Jean has been an English country dancer and musician since 1965. Almost every year since then, he has attended Pinewood Camp as a CDSS staff member and has chaired many of the dance weeks there, Early Music Week, English Dance Week, and English American Dance Weeks. He has taught and called at clubs, workshops, festivals, and balls throughout the United States, as well as England, Europe, Canada, and Japan, appearing as a featured caller and guest of honor at many of these countries' festivals, including the Gala 50th anniversary of England's Sidmouth International Festival in 2004 and the Folk Dance Federation of Japan's National Teachers Workshop in 2019. Jean is the creator of the Amherst Assembly, now New London Assembly, in 1996 in connection with the Amherst Early Music Festival, a conference devoted to the scholarly and practical look at English country dance, which we love. He is author of a resource guide and training curriculum on musicianship for English country dance teachers, which is used as the basis of a course offered at Pinewoods, Mendocino, and Berea country dance workshops. As a dance musician, boy, this goes on and on. It's understandable if you know him. As a dance musician, he has made 4 recordings of music for dances of Fritz Herman and Gary Rudman, and is the producer of the 15-disc series of English dance recordings featuring Boston-based band Bare Necessities. As a classically trained musician, Jean has coached recorder ensembles across the United States and was president of the American Recorder Society for 6 years. And let us also mention he is the founder and executive director of Gotham Early Music Scene, a service and advocacy organization for early music in New York City. He is an English country dance guru for half a century. He's a musician, teacher, caller, organizer, author, researcher. Please welcome Gene Murrow. We're so thrilled to finally have you on our show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Darlene, and thank you to everyone. It's true, they work very hard to produce this show, and it's terrific. After that long introduction, I guess there's nothing I need to say. Anyway, I think we can go right into thing number one.
Great, and we will. Thing number one is, I'm only here because the phone wasn't working. Did I get that censored? There we go. Yes.
When this pandemic is over, and it will be over, all of our dance communities are going to go back to the challenge of recruiting new dancers who we hope will come and love English country dance and stay and join and dance with us. And all of us have our own stories of how we got hooked from whatever community we were in at the time. And I'd like to tell you my story. It begins in the summer of 1965. I had just finished my freshman year at Columbia University here in New York, and I got a call from my oboe teacher, Lois Wan, asking me if I would like to play a one-week chamber music workshop near Cape Cod. She had been contracted to play, but got a last-minute European tour that she didn't want to turn down. She had tried all of her professional colleagues, so she was scraping the bottom of the barrel a little bit and asking her students. And I said, sure, what do I have to do? And she said, well, you have to play oboe for Henry Purcell's Come Ye Sons of Art, and you'll have to teach a beginning recorder class. I said, well, I own a recorder, but I don't play one, and I don't really teach it. She said, well, you'll figure it out. Stay one page ahead of the students. It's a beginning class. So I did buy a recorder and practiced a little, and how I actually passed the audition by the director, Eric Lieber, is a whole other story and a whole other thing. But I did say I would love to do it. And my father was a private pilot. That was his hobby, flying. And he agreed to fly me up to Plymouth, Massachusetts. So I packed my bag, including concert black and a bow tie, I think a tuxedo. I was going to a music camp after all. I thought it was, Interlaken or Aspen or Tanglewood, something like that. And so we got in his plane, we flew off, and he said, Plymouth, Massachusetts, that's a pretty good sized town. I'll just drop you off at the airport and you can get a taxi to Pinewoods Camp. I had learned that it was called Pinewoods Camp. We get to the airport, and it turns out, I think it was a grass strip or a poorly paved airstrip, and a Quonset hut was the terminal. But my father dropped me off. He took off in his airplane, and I walked over there. Walked into the terminal, and it was this sort of smoke-filled room with a peeling, a linoleum floor and old vinyl furniture and a bunch of derelict-looking guys standing around. And I said, excuse me, is there a taxi here? And they said, yeah, we're taxi drivers. I said, great, can somebody take me to Pinewoods Camp? And one of the guys looked over and said, hey, Lou, where's Pinewoods Camp? And Frank said, Frankie, I don't know where it is. Joe, do you know where Pinewoods Camp is? Joe says, isn't that the old Starro place over by the Standish Forest? And Frankie said, yeah, that's it. Come on, kid, I'll take you. So I get into Frankie's jalopy, and off we go. And I think my dad and I had landed around 4 o'clock, 4:30. And by around 6 o'clock, we were still driving around in circles in the Standish Forest, as many people have done who've come to Pinewoods. And I'm getting a little nervous because I've been in this old car for about an hour and a half or more. It's getting dark. The trees are closing in. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. We're bumping along on dirt roads. Finally, we see a tiny little sign that said Pinewoods Camp, and he turns in to the driveway, the rutted driveway we all know and love. We get to what is Pine Cones, the clearing at Pine Cones. He said, well, this must be it. And he opens the door, That was it. Pay him. Get out of the cab. He turns around, drives away. And there I am standing in front of Pine Cones. Not a person in sight, getting dark, tall trees, insects buzzing. I didn't know what was going on. I heard some humanoid noise coming from up the hill. So I started up the little road that goes from Pine Cones over towards the dining room. And on the left-hand side, where New Biggin Pavilion used to be, the old New Biggin was there. And I see through the trees this tall, thin guy with a handlebar mustache and long hair, wearing all white clothing and crossed ribbons on his chest and ribbons on his elbows and bells tied to his knees, jumping up and down, singing to himself, waving handkerchiefs up and down. And I'm going, what is this? Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. And I didn't know what to do other than keep walking towards the sound. And I was met coming the other way by an elderly woman. It was Liesl Kulbach's mother, Johanna Kulbach, who was there to teach recorder. And she said, who are you? And I said, I'm the new guy. I'm Lois Wanzer. Oh, Lois, you must be the oboe boy. And I said, yep. And that's what I was called for the whole week. I was the oboe boy. I was only 18. And she said, have you had dinner? I said, no, I've been driving around the Standish Forest for 2 hours. She says, oh, I have a hard-boiled egg. She pulls out of her bag. So that was my dinner on the first day at Pinewoods. I had a hard-boiled egg from Johanna. Afterwards, I got to talk to a few people. She introduced me to some of the other staff members, Martha Bixler and Judith Davidoff and some others. And then it was time to walk up over the hill to the camp house. So I walked up over the hill to the camp house. I still didn't know where I was going to sleep or anything. And we get to the camp house, and there, standing at the front of the room, was the infamous May Gadd, or as everyone who knew her called her, Gay. And this will be a familiar sight to all of us who've been to Pinewoods in those years. There she is. And she gave the opening announcements. I discovered that this was this Chamber Music Week, as it was called, was the first of 4 weeks at Pinewoods. There were 2 dance weeks and then a folk music week. And she talked about no smoking and about the raccoons and various other the rules and regulations of Pinewoods. And I thought, oh, all right, okay, so there are raccoons and I can deal with this. I don't smoke, She says, okay, everyone. And at the end, let's all go dance. And I thought, dance? We walked down the path to C-sharp Pavilion. That was C-sharp 3 pavilions ago. It's been rebuilt twice already. And there I sat down on one of the benches around the edge, and I saw musicians. I recognized musicians tuning up and playing in the band shell, and I saw people standing around. And then I saw the following. I saw what we would all recognize as an English country dance. And it looked like this. This is taken from about that time. This might be a couple of years later. See if you can identify Martha Bixler, who, by the way, just died last week. Helena Cornelius is there. Kitty Creelman, the author of I Care Not for These Ladies, is in the upper right, dancing with her soon-to-be husband, Paul Scrobella. So I saw all of this, and I'm sitting on the bench, and then I see people taking hands and jumping up and down and circling left and right, and men taking hands and circling with each other, 2-hand turns with each other. And the more I watched this, the more I thought, this is really weird. I mean, I was an 18-year-old freshman in college, just from New York City, born and bred, and here were these guys jumping and skipping around, and I thought, this is just too weird. And on top of seeing the guy in the woods dancing and being hungry, I said, that's it, I'm out of here. I walked back up the hill to the office, and I remember Gay saying that there was a payphone. So I got onto the porch of the office, and I found the little cubby, and there was the payphone. And I put my dime into the phone, and nada. The phone wasn't working. I was planning to call my father, tell him to get that airplane up the first thing in the morning and get me out of this strange and weird place with all these weird people. Phone didn't work, couldn't reach him. What could I do? There I was with my suitcase sitting in C-sharp. I'm in the phone booth. I just went back down to C-sharp and plonked myself back down. And a very lovely young woman, Kitty Creelman, Kitty Scrobella, came by and said, you must be the oboe boy. And I said, yeah, here I am. And she said, why don't you come and dance? So she took me by the hand. She was attractive, and I've always had an eye for attractive women, so I stood up and stood in line with her, and I was waiting to experience this. My first dance, the dance they announced next, my very first English country dance, was Morpeth Rant. That almost did me in for good, but I stayed on. I was hooked by the music, actually, and the more I heard the music, the more I fell in love with it, and the more people came by and encouraged me to dance. Martha and Judith and all the wonderful people who were there came to help me out. The band, by the way, was John Davison playing piano, Marshall Barron. Phil didn't come until the following week, and some others I don't quite remember. So the moral of this story is, I did stay on. After the second night, I totally was in love with it. I went up to Gay and I said, I would like to stay for the full 4 weeks. How can I do that? She says, you have to talk to the Conants, and I spoke to Lily Conant, and she said, well, if you're willing to wash pots in the kitchen for 3 weeks, you can stay. So I did. And we have one more photo. The following week, actually, Marshall and I entertained the Dance Week participants with a trio sonata, and I think we have a photo. This is me, there I am, my first week at Pinewoods. There's Marshall. We had just come from Chamber Music Week, and this was the first Dance Week, and we played a little trio sonata. So the moral of the story is that, you know, when you see that person sitting on the sidelines, where is he coming from? What has he just been through, or she? How can we connect with her? What can we say? What can we do to bring them in? And what can we say or do to encourage them to stay? And for me, after that horrible experience, really, at that age, it was the kindness of all these people, the wonderful music, and eventually, of course, the wonderful dancing.
That is a wonderful story. Okay, we're going to move into thing 2.
Thing 2.
The way we were and why I dance the way I do.
In her talk a few weeks ago, Olivia Barry asked a question that, as an ethnologist or folklorist that she is, you know, who are we and what is it that we think we're doing? And you know, mostly we're sort of ordinary people, and we're enjoying a very pleasant pastime, which is sociable and good exercise and all of that. But back in 1965, when I first went to Pinewoods, there was a prevailing mythology, I will call it, that added another layer to it. And it's not, we weren't merely people enjoying an activity. We were carrying on a very important tradition. We were serious carriers of a tradition of indigenous vernacular dance. And we were there for a purpose, to learn that tradition and to proselytize it, to spread it, to do the work, to return this tradition of dance to the people, the English people, and by extension, the colonists, the American people. And as such, we were the followers of the work of Cecil Sharp. Cecil Sharp, we have a photo of him, is a musicologist and a teacher in early 20th century of England. He had been in Australia teaching. He came back to England at a time when it was generally accepted that England did not have a vernacular or folk culture. It was actually in writing, in books and articles, that England was unique among European countries in that it didn't have folk songs, it didn't have folk dances. And kids in England at that time, in the early 20th century, were taught German music. They were given a recorder, they were taught little German folk tunes, and so on. There's an apocryphal story in 1903 that Sharp was sitting at his vicar's garden, and while they were having tea, Sharp overheard the gardener humming a tune, and it was a beautiful tune. And he went over to the gardener and said, "What is that?" And the gardener said, "Oh, it's a song I learned." "What's it called?" "It's called The Seeds of Love." "And where does it come from?" And the gardener said, "Well, I learned it from my grandmother, who learned it from her mother." And that apocryphally opened the door to Sharp, saying, "Wait a minute, there really is an English folk tradition," and that ignited his interest in English folk song. And a similar story about watching the Morris dancers on Boxing Day when he was visiting his sister ignited his interest in the Morris dance and then folk dancing. Anyway, Sharp began writing articles. He was invited to America by George Baker to help do the movement and dance for a production of Midsummer Night's Dream. He came to the attention of Helen Osborne Storrow, the wife of James Storrow, philanthropists in Boston. Those of you who've been to Boston probably know Storrow Drive. Helen Storrow thought that this English folk dance thing would be a great thing for the Girl Scouts, a movement of which she was a leader and a big philanthropist. She ran a camp called Pine Tree Camp, which was a training ground for the Girl Scouts. She invited Sharp back many times to teach this new English folk dancing and English folk song. So at this time, Sharp's work was really important to us. And what is the bookstore at Pinewoods now was actually then primarily a library. And we would go into this little cabin that smelled of the must of the years past and the pine scent and the rippling waters of Long Pond outside. And we'd pore over the sacred texts. Here's one of them. This is one of the first editions of Sharp's country dance book, wherein he published some of the dance instructions. And I would sit there by myself with the naked light bulb hanging above me, looking at these texts. Another one was the sword dances of England, this idea that there were sword dances. And we could look at this book and the music and Sharp's notations. In 1927, Sharp sent over a cadre of people to the summer school. There had been some summer schools for English dance that Mrs. Storrow and others, Louise Chapin, had organized in Maine and in Massachusetts. A group in 1927 visited the Agricultural College at Amherst, now the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And they taught a summer school for dancing, English dancing. And fortunately, there was a filmmaker there, and we have a film of the dancing. This is the way Sharp taught his people to dance. What Sharp understood was that the dancing that was being done in the 17th and 18th centuries in England was rather stylized and would not fly in a contemporary population. He planned to proselytize these dances to workers, farmers, manufacturing men, school children, teachers. He knew all the fancy little stepping and everything wouldn't work. So he invented a style, a very vigorous, hippy-hoppy, if you will, skipping kind of a style. And you're going to see that now in this film that was preserved by the Conan family, resurrected by Brad Saylor, and then assembled into a DVD by Mitch Diamond. Here is a bit of Argiers from 1927. One of the dancers, you'll see in a moment, in a white dress. There's no audio for this, by the way. The woman in the white dress is gay, May Gadd. Some people think that the film has been speeded up, but it has not. There is surviving audio from the time. This is it. Here's set and turn single. Notice the style. Nobody stops moving. We were taught on the crossovers, you back up first and then cross. The step that Sharp used to describe this step was the running step, and you can see it really was a running step. The teachers and dancers at the time wore plimsolls, or the English version of sneakers. And if you were dancing indoors, you really had to have those sneakers on, because going around those turns at that speed, you could easily slip and fall. I don't know how many of you have done Argiers. It's fallen out of favor. It's one of those little two-couple dances. We do Parsons Farewell a little bit more. I was teaching a workshop in Princeton 10 years ago or so, and I said to the workshop, we're going to spend the whole session here, an hour and a half, on one dance, and a big groan went up. And I said, that dance is going to be Argiers. It's really a beautiful little dance. And by the end of the hour and a half, everybody really appreciated it. It was an advanced class. Don't teach that to beginners. Don't try that at home. So that was the style that Gay taught. And that I learned, and I learned from all the other teachers who were at the dance weeks at that time. It was, Gay herself, Art Cornelius, who was a major country dance teacher at the time. His wife, Helena, was starting to teach country. Nibs Matthews came over from England. Bob Hyder was a teacher. K.G. Cajolet. Many, many other luminaries of the time were teaching there. I have a photo of Gay as a younger woman and what she looked like to us when she was teaching, maybe a little before my time. But she was reputed to be a wonderful dancer. She was a strict but wonderful teacher as well, and some of the old timers will remember her. The repertoire were the dances that Sharp had collected in the little villages, the surviving dances that, Thomas Hardy had described in his novels. Also, the dances that he had found in the British Library, published by Playford, starting in the 17th century. The biggest and probably the most important mistake that Sharp made was he thought that those notations in the Playford collections were notations of vernacular dance, of folk dance. He didn't understand at the beginning that those were court dances. Those were highly choreographed little dances. He thought those were the unadulterated folk dances of the early times. So he thought he was going to teach Argiers and Hole in the Wall and all these other things to, the farmers and miners working in England in 1925. But that's a whole other story. At the time, we also added a whole lot of American dances, because as I said, we wanted to tie it into American dancing as well. And so the repertoire was a real mixture. I was in the beginner's class at Pinewoods for 4 years. One stayed in the beginner's class until you could do the repertoire, which was the Sharp dances, all of the Sharp country dance book dances and the traditional dances. When you came down from your cabin that first morning of dance week and waited in line for breakfast, everybody huddled around the post in the middle of the dining room entrance, looking for your name, which class you were assigned to. You were assigned to beginning, intermediate, or advanced. And as I say, I was in beginners for several years. I made some notes of the repertoire for the beginners class when I was at Brasstown 4 years after my first year, 1969. And you can see it's quite a mixture of contra dances, traditional English dances like Steamboat and Cumberland Square, and some Playford dances, Black Nag, Hole in the Wall, Christchurch Bells. Also, again, for the American connection, there was a real interest in play party games, because when Sharp came over on Mrs. Storrow's nickel a few times, he got to Appalachia and collected some so-called running set, big set dances and play party games, and we learned those too, because those were part of the Sharp mythology, the Sharp repertoire. That raises the question of, why don't we dance that way now? What happened? That was a really lively way of dancing. And I have a three-part theory. One is, as with so many other participatory arts movements in the 60s, there was a large cohort who came into it, people who came of age in the 50s and 60s. And we all stayed with it, and we all got older. So as our knees weakened and our ankles weakened and we ran out, the dancing just slowed down. But perhaps more important was the acceptance of the work of Pat Shaw and others who broke away from the Cecil Sharp monopoly. They began reconstructing other dances, collecting other dances, writing dances. God forbid, how could you write a folk dance? That was considered just not done. But he did. And so the emphasis went from learning to dance a fixed repertoire really well to learning more and more new dances. The emphasis was on these new dances. And the third reason then is the explosion of these new dances, the number of dances by contemporary composers. Fried Herman started writing, and Gary Rudman, and everyone else, and Colin Hume in England. And so now, when you go out onto the dance floor, it's not to do Child Grove, which you've done 275 times before, really well. It's to learn Peter and Peggy for the first time. So the emphasis has changed, and that's why we don't dance that way anymore, I think. Also, our contra dance movement peeled off a lot of the younger people who really wanted to, as we say, jump and sweat. So the traditional English dances became less popular because the older folks were more interested in the more stately dances and the new dances. So that's why we dance the way we do. Darlene, you're muted.
I know, a rookie mistake. All right, we're going to move into thing 3 before we answer a couple of questions. Okay. So, thing 3, I like this one. Words matter, but not too much.
Sometimes contentious matter. I've been involved in some of those contentions. Facing our community is terminology. And what do we call the people doing our dances? And how do we name the figures? And I want to start by saying this is nothing new. When English country dancing emerged in the court of Elizabeth I in the 16th century, where there were a lot of Italian dancing masters, I'm sure the dancers were called lords and ladies. And then as it spread to other, maybe lesser aristocratic venues like the country houses of the noblemen or maybe the inns of court, they began to be called ladies and gentlemen. And the guys who used to be called lords probably got teed off that they were now just gentlemen instead of lords and ladies. It was now ladies and gents, ladies and gentlemen. And after by the time of Playford, in the middle of the 17th century, the 1651 publication, the terminology had morphed to men and women, a real come down from lords and ladies and gentlemen, men and women. And if you look at Sharp, book now in his country dance book, published in the early part of the 20th century, he picked up from Playford, and you can see he was okay. If you look at the highlighted section on the left, first man leads the second woman up a double. And if you look over on the right-hand side, he even gets into some positional terminology. First couple and the second man do the straight hey. So Sharp was okay. He understood that there were no leaders or followers or so on. But after World War II, when Douglas Kennedy took over from Sharp and there was a real movement to broaden the base of English country dancing, they started publishing these country dance manuals. And I've got some of the original editions. This is from 1949. And you can see this is the first of the country dance manuals. A lot of traditional dances, if you look at the list, Double Lead Through and Morpeth Rant and Soldier's Joy, but also the Hole in the Wall, which was presented as an early community dance. They were still trying to buy into the fact that these were folk dances. But look at the next slide at the terminology that was used in the 40s, 50s, and 60s in England. You'll see here that instead of calling them men and women, we get men and girls, the right and left through for the girls, and it's all men and girls throughout the publication of the country dance manuals, which Lindsay doesn't like that much. So that was the terminology. So again, it had changed once again. My theater friends, and maybe Chip Prince, if he's on today, or Christina Conroy, who are both active in the Broadway theater. That, by the way, is the terminology they use for the chorus on Broadway shows. It's men and girls. And the venereal term, or the plural, the term for the whole group is kids. Okay, kids, all you men and girls can take a 5-minute break. Anyhow, three developments have really put pressure on our men and women, or God forbid, men and girls terminology. And I think it's the gender balancing arguments that came up later in the 20th century, the emergence of gender-free dance communities, gender-free terminology, and the recent gender fluidity, non-binary dancers. So what that led to is positional calling. As we both know, as we all know, callers know, that most English country dancers can be taught and called without any reference to gender or side of the dance at all. You can talk about first couples, first line, top and bottom couple, first diagonal, first long diagonal. And I do that as much as I can, avoiding numbers and avoiding gender as much as I can. And there have been many other solutions. Carl Whitman and his followers, Chris Sackett and Brooke Friendly, came up with the R's and the L's, the rights and the lefts, to distinguish the sides without using gender. I find that a little confusing. I find it confusing to say that the first left cast off one place, set to the third right, go past by the left shoulder. I get muddled up, but Chris and Brooke I know are very good at it, and many others are. The R's and L's, right and left, led to larks and ravens, L and R, larks and ravens. Larks has the same single syllable as men. Ravens has the 2 syllables of women. And we callers have all learned that dancers are not always listening so carefully, so all I hear is blah. So if you just say blah or blah blah, it's men or women. So larks and ravens worked for a long time. It was changed to robins. Again, this is my personal opinion. I don't like that terminology. I hope it goes away. I'm out on the dance floor and somebody calls me a lark or a robin, I feel like I'm back in kindergarten. I'm sorry. When I was in kindergarten in first grade, we had the lark reading group and the robin reading group and the chicken reading group, and I don't go for it. Another solution, the one I've used at recorder workshops where I teach English country dancing, and it's 98% women, is the geographic calling. So there's the clock side and the pond side. So I'll say, all of you on this side, everybody, stand up, face your partner. That's your partner beside you, your neighbor up across from you, your neighbor beside you. And if you're on this side of the line, you're a clock. And on this side of the line, you're a pond. So all the clock side people fall back and come forward, whatever it is. And that works really well. And I've used pond and woods, or door and window, and so on. And in cases like that, it works really, really well when you have a single sex. I found out, by the way, that this is a huge advantage for some class of our dyslexic dancers. I was teaching at Mendocino once, and I got into the woods side. I forget the porch side. There was the porch and the clock, I think, porch and clock. And a woman came up to me and said, this is wonderful. I am dyslexic, and this is the first English country dance workshop I've really felt comfortable. You know why? And I said, I'd love to know. And she said, well, I'm dyslexic. You're a caller. You say to dancers, pass your partner by the right shoulder. Now, which way does my body have to move first in order to do that? I go, left. She says, right. That's correct. Right. You're saying pass right shoulder. I got to think to move to my left, and I get all muddled up. So knowing that the women are always on the fireplace side and the men are always on the dining room side really made it easy for me, and I could do the dance. Anyway, so that's the story about men and women. But then we have the problem with gypsies. This is another development, and when this came up, I know of 2 Roma women active in the early music and country dance communities, and I had long talks with both of them. And I said, what do you think of this? And they say, you know what? We don't care. Calling this dance move a gypsy is really unrelated to my identity and culture. And I believe that context really is everything. We're talking about the name of a dance move, like a Yemenite step in international dancing. And the example I give is this. It's perfectly okay to say, Michael is a Jew. That is a perfectly okay statement. But if you say, Michael visited the flea market and he got a much better price from the vendor, he Jewed the guy down to $10 from $20, that is an outrageous insult. So context matters. We're not insulting the Roma, I say, when we call it a gypsy. That said, I love the right shoulder round or left shoulder round, and when I call now, I say that first man, second woman, or first diagonals, first corners, do a right shoulder gypsy, right shoulder round. That's how I say it. So for the people who know the one word gypsy, they've got it. The people who are newer and haven't absorbed all the terminology, they get the right shoulder round. And I hope everybody's happy, or at least everybody's equally unhappy. As a lighting director friend of mine once said, he had a t-shirt that said, I'm not happy until you're not happy. So that's my theory. I also think there's an issue here of personal accommodation. The world is a complex, diverse place. You are going to be insulted somehow if you do anything, anytime. I go to performances of the St. John Passion, and I hear all this anti-Semitic text coming forth. I deal with it. Okay, that's what Bach wrote. That's the German liturgy at the time. There you are. And I think we have to draw a line between personal accommodation and a group's policy. And sometimes I think that line is going too far in the way of personal preference. I had a dance. I got into a Facebook kerfuffle with a dancer in New York who was non-binary, and he wrote that every time he goes to a dance and he hears men and women, he feels he's being kicked in the shins, and we should stop doing that. And I said, I don't understand that. First of all, you're non-binary. I would think you would be more comfortable on either side. I'm a cis-het man, and I dance the woman's role all the time, and I have no problem when the caller says, women, pass through. I pass through. So you're non-binary. Why is this such a big problem? Well, I am terribly insulted. I'm not heard. My voice isn't heard. I'm kicked in the shins, and I left it there, and I'm now a bad guy. But anyhow, my solutions to this issue, For adamantly gender-free communities, when I'm asked to dance, I choose dances that don't require gender, and I use positional terms. For others, I make an announcement. I say, I'm a dance historian, among other things. I'm going to use the historical terms. If you're dancing on this side of the room, this side of the line or the set, I don't care what gender you are. I don't care what sex you are. I don't care how you identify. I'm going to call you men because that's a historical term. Has nothing to do with your sex or gender. And on this side of the line, I'm going to call you women. Nothing to do with your sex or gender or identification. It's just that's what it is in the historical books. If you look at the 17th century books, that's what it is. And then for very special circumstances like the recorder workshops or the Japanese workshops where it's 99.9% women, we use the geographic calling. Those of you who are on the clock side, those of you who are on the door side. So words matter, but not too much.
That was great. And there are definitely conversations going in the chat box. And I think this is going to be a great thing to talk about in the after talk. I have a couple questions I want to ask you about in there, but for now I'm going to move on because I know we have a couple more questions that we want to talk about in thing number 4 and 5. So let's save some time for those.
Okay.
Thing number 4, recordings.
Right. I did, for this talk, I did a count of the CDs that I either played on or produced, and it came to something like 22 different CDs, including the 15-disc series that Bare Necessities did. Lindsay has a photo of those. Many of you will recognize these discs. I worked with Bare Necessities over the course of about 10 years to produce these 15. Here's number 1 and number 15. Doing a recording of English country dancing as opposed to, say, a piano sonata or a symphony or a folk song even, is uniquely problematic because great dance music results from musicians and dancers feeding off each other. There's energy back and forth, and the tempo of the dance and the spirit are affected by what we see and feel on the dance floor. Also, the dancers expect playfulness and variety and improvisation and musical jokes. And you probably watched a band, somebody does something silly and then the other instrument picks up on it and makes it worse, and then we talk to each other and play games. And that involves risk. And maybe you'll hit a wrong note, as you're fooling around, but it's ephemeral. A recording is the antithesis of that. You're there, and God, every note I play is being recorded, and it's going to be played for all time, and everybody's going to hear it over and over again for 250 years. And we have no dancers there to get some energy from. There's no tempo check. And so things tighten up a little. And one result is that the best stuff happens between the real takes. And would be lost forever, except I found that in big budget recordings, they turn the tape or the disc on at the beginning of the session and they just leave it on because they know that between the takes, cool stuff is going to happen when everybody is relaxed, and they may use some of that stuff. That herein is the cause of a scandal in the English country dance community 50 years ago that actually had its origins in the Middle Ages. First, a small bit of music theory. Everybody knows a major scale. Julie Andrews taught us all that. And the nice thing about a major scale is that you can have a sense of finality. There's this, what we call a leading tone. It's the white keys on the piano. Is a major scale starting on C. Now you don't have to start on the, somebody said, let's see the concertina. I'll show you in a moment. You don't have to start on the white key. You can make a major scale anyway. You can start on one of the black keys, like an E flat. That's do a deer starting on E flat. Now the nice thing about that is on the concertina, the white keys are in the middle rows, and they're kind of hard to play, but the black keys are on the outside. So a key like E flat major is kind of easy to play. Now, you don't have to start on the number 1 note. You can 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can start on the number 2 note. And that creates a different scale. And we use that scale. Some of our country dancers use that scale. And that doesn't have a leading tone. And the scholars in the Middle Ages understood all this. They understood that you don't have to have the same scale starting on the same note. And they named these different scales modes or tones. And that was the Dorian mode. It's a major scale, but it starts on the second note, not on the first note. It's the Dorian mode. And it doesn't have that leading tone. It has this, there's a little bit of distance there. You don't have to start on the second note. You can start on the third note, and you get this scale starting on the third note. And that too has a funny note below it, but more weirdly, it has a very close note just above. And we have some country dances that are written in that mode, which the medieval theorists named the Phrygian mode. And here's that funny note. So that's the Phrygian mode. I like that because it's all flats and it's all on the outer buttons of the concertina. Well, fast forward 900 years. I'm sitting in Andover, Massachusetts, just having finished my first teaching job in 1969. And I get a call from the famous Albert Grossman, who was a well-known producer of folk music. And he said, I got your name from some people. Would you like to play on the next Judy Collins album? I said, I'd have to think about that. And 4 milliseconds later, I said, sure, yes, I'd like to do that. And he gave me the details about it. He said that Miss Collins would like to do an Irish patriot song, and she felt it would be good to have an English concertina on it. And at that time, in 1969, there were not that many concertina players. I had an English concertina, he found out, and I knew how to use it. So that qualified me for this gig. Anyway, he gave me the address, and a couple of weeks later, I drove down to my parents' house in Westchester, grabbed the concertina, took the train into New York, and started to look for the address where this recording session was going to be in Greenwich Village. And if you know Greenwich Village, you know that it's not like the rest of Manhattan, which is laid out on a grid. It's cow paths. It's the old Dutch cow path. Well, I got good and lost trying to find this address, and I had to run. I think I ran across Washington Square Park at least 2 times, going back and forth. Finally, I find the address. It's a townhouse. I ring the bell. I'm let in. I'm told to go up to the 4th floor. It's a walk up. Run up to the 4th floor, and there is all set up a recording studio. And there's Judy Collins. She insisted we call her Judy, and her recording team. And she said, you must be the concertina boy. And I said, yes, I'm Gene Murrow. She says, great. I said, look, can I have just a minute to warm up? You know, I've just been running around Greenwich Village trying to find this. She said, sure, go ahead, take your time. They all kind of went and got a cup of tea or something. And I warmed up with my little meditative. This is such an easy tune to play on the concertina. And it's kind of meditative. Anyway, we went on and did the recording. The track she wanted the concertina for was The Patriot Game, a song about the Irish rebellions. And we're going to play it at the end of the web chat. I think the going out music will be Judy's singing The Patriot Game. I'm playing concertina. And there's some wonderful mandolin playing on that take, on that track. And those of you may know the person, it's by Paul Prestopino, plays with Hold the Mustard. And he and I met at Judy's session. We haven't seen each other until we met again at Princeton, 50 years later, 40 years later, and said, oh yeah, you were the concertina guy, and you were the mandolin guy. Anyhow, what they didn't tell me was that while I was warming up playing the Beggar Boy, they had the tape rolling. And in post-production, as they were putting the album together, Judy said, what is that? And they said, Gene Murrow was warming up, that's his tune. She said, I want to use that to lead into the other song I'm doing on the album called Farewell to Tarwathie, some seafaring shanty or something. So they started a mad search to find me so they could find out what it was, because this is a big commercial recording. You had to have a publisher, you had to have royalties paid, you had to have a composer, all of these things. Well, I had left my job at Andover. I was looking for housing in my new place in Cambridge. I was staying with my parents. I had 2 weeks at Pinewoods. I was all over the map, and they never could find me. And it came time to press the album and put it out. And for better or worse, they just put Gene's song. So this is what the album looked like, and you can see the track list. There's the Patriot Game. This listing is actually not the way it's listed on the records. They actually had the authors of these various tunes. And there's Gene's song, and it said Gene Murrow as the author. Well, when that album got released, and some of my country dance people saw it, most notably Gay, she had a fit. She said, here was a great opportunity to introduce the work, English country dancing, to this large, popular audience. And Murrow, you blew it. You told them it was Gene's song, and you didn't say it was Beggar's Boy and from Playford First Edition and Cecil Sharp and all of that. And I told her the story, and I've had to repeat that story about 75 times since, because every once in a while I get an email or a phone call that says, I just listened to this great Whales and Nightingales Judy Collins album, and you played Beggar Boy, and why is it called Gene's song? And so now by doing it on the Historical Tea and Dance Society's web chat, I've taken care of a few dozen people who might be wondering about that. So that was the great scandal from 50 years ago. It starts with medieval harmonies and medieval music theory, Phrygian mode, easy key on the concertina, poor Gene warming up after he couldn't find Stacy Keach's townhouse, which is where the recording session was. We recorded some other tracks. She rented Carnegie Hall for the other tracks. Empty, Carnegie Hall empty. We played on the stage because she liked the acoustics. So that's what you can do when you're Judy Collins. That's thing 4. What's next? Oh, well, you'll hear the Patriot Game at the end of this chat.
What's next is thing 5.
Thing 5. But is it art? So, you know, I was a classically trained musician. I was an oboe player for many, many years. I played with Judy. I played with Paul Winter. I play on some Peter, Paul, and Mary recordings and New York Baroque Ensemble and a bunch of things. And my parents were, you know, very pleased. They had invested all this money in music lessons, but they always questioned this English country dance thing. Neither of my parents were dancers. Neither of them were musicians. And they just didn't understand my going off into the woods and jumping around with all my adults acting like kids, friends. And so in 1995, after 30 years of doing this, I had a bit of a crisis. I thought, why am I doing this? What is this? You know, if I had spent a quarter of the time looking after my stock market investments, I would be a billionaire. You know, why am I doing this? And I decided that I'm doing it because it's art. And I realized that the best choreographies, the really best choreographies, married to beautiful and appropriate and engaging tunes, is art. It's not the Sistine Chapel ceiling. It's not a Beethoven symphony. It's not a Balanchine ballet. I'm the first to admit all that. But maybe it's a Scarlatti harpsichord sonata or an 18th century French watercolor. And it's art because there are disciplines and there are rules, there are discernible structures, the movements must interact with other dancers, you have to return eventually to where you started, we have to use regular rhythms, you can't just have random rhythms, we use duple or triple meter, there's symmetry, there's confinement to a set. The best dances have narrative or a storyline that, you know, people have mentioned in the talks. St. Margaret's Hill, wonderful storyline. And what elevates the English country dance above, say, craft, is an ineffable quality that really makes some dances great. And we all feel it. It's that emotional response that, wow, interestingly, there's near uniform agreement about what makes that so. When I teach choreographer workshops at Pinewoods or Mendocino or Berea or wherever, one of the first things I do is I ask every participant to list their favorite dances. and there's a lot of overlap. And then I asked them to say, what is it that they liked about those dances? And the same responses come over and over again. Wonderful music that makes me want to move to it. It has a mood that I can get into. There's symmetry, all of these qualities. And I say that is what makes it art. It's not just a beautifully built cabinet, you know, this, and this, but then there's this transcendent quality, taking all of these elements and elevating it one step above. And so in 1995, I decided not to quit. I decided I would continue as an English country dancer and caller and musician. And what I then realized, that even more importantly perhaps, that folk dancing and English country dancing most notably is an art that we ourselves create collaboratively with the choreographer, with the composer. Not for performance, but we're not doing it to performance. And we're not doing it for worship. It's not a religious ceremony. We're not doing it for financial gain. We are collaboratively creating these works of art for our own enjoyment and our own enrichment. And we don't always succeed. Sometimes it's pretty awful. And I do remember, I'll often say to a group, I said, you know, you can do better. That looked pretty awful. But when it works, we all get into that state, and it's tremendously enjoyable and tremendously enriching. And I hope my little talk today has been the same. Thank you.
Well, that was great. And we did get, we're getting a lot of nice compliments.
Well, I've left some time for questions.
Yeah, a couple. There were so many things that we didn't get a chance to talk about too. So please come into the after talk, because there will be more things that we are talking about there. One of the things you didn't touch on is the recordings that you've made more recently for us in the English country dance community. And let's see, I'm looking for the names of the person that asked it, but someone did ask, Dawn and Diane Bell, do you anticipate producing more audio recordings? And we, of course, all want to know.
I think so. I mean, there are younger people now. I mean, if you did the math, when I graduated freshman year in 1965, you realize that I'm in my mid-70s here. So a lot of young people are doing some wonderful things, and styles are changing just as the dance did. But actually, Graham Christian and I have a little project we're cooking up. His wonderful book, The Playford Assembly. We'd like to do a recording or two of all the dances there that don't have recordings, so people can use his book for groups that don't have live music.
That's great. And Lindsay's going to take over for a moment.
Yes, we do have a question from Ruth. Let me see.
Yeah.
Here we go. Ruth, go ahead if you'd like, and feel free to turn on your video and unmute your audio. So you can ask the question.
We're going to get a question in ancient Greek here. Yeah.
No, I mean, so you were talking about how much agreement there is about what our favorite dances are. And it struck me that there's also a lot of agreement about what makes a great tune. But while I can name components that make dances great, can you say something about what it is that makes the great tunes that we love so lovable?
Yeah, there are, as in any great art, there are underlying rules that are not really apparent to listeners who are not musicians or who are not looking at the music. There are rules, and there are numerous ones, but using sequences, cadences, energy, the contour of a tune. And if you, I remember overhearing Gary Rudman brought the first tune that he wrote for an English country dance to Margaret Ann Martin and said, Margaret Ann, would you help me with this tune? And she went through it and she said, yeah, don't do this, do this. The rule says if you're going to do da 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 da, you should do one more da 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 da, and kind of, we expect in the English country dance, we expect either a 4 or 8 bar phrase, so fix that. And there are a whole number of such rules. Another thing that makes great tunes, and people like Jacqueline Schwab or Kate Barnes or any of our great musicians will attest, some tunes give you a lot to work with. Jonathan Jensen tunes in particular, they leave you all, they imply things, but not too much. And you can go with it and do wonderful things. There's lots of room to improvise. And that's what the dancers really appreciate. I think that's pretty, I could go into all, I won't, it would take a long time. But if you're interested, there are songwriting workshops, for example, that explain how to craft a great tune. And not all the tunes that are crafted are great, just like dance choreography or like art. Certain tunes, do transcend for ineffable reasons. But those are the main reasons. Following the rules, or as Palestrina said, breaking the rules artfully. But know the rules. English country dance music tends to be more conservative than most other contemporary music. Usually it's tonal music. It has 4, 8, 16, 20, 24, 30 bar, 32 bar phrases. As I say, the meter is regular. So there's a lot of discipline that goes into a good tune, and then the great tunes are the ones that somebody like Jacqueline can take and run with.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Well, I would have my head chopped off if I didn't ask you what's your favorite dance.
Aha. I think among the historical dances, the first dance that I fell in love with, I could call that my favorite, was Hole in the Wall. In modern dances, there are just so many. I love Gary's Peter and Peggy, Colin Hume's Elizabeth, Orley's dance, When Laura Smiles. What a wonderful tune and dance. The tune is an Elizabethan tune. I love Brooke and Chris's Potter's Wheel. I'm coming to love, as I learn, a lot of Jenna Simpson's dance. I love Jenna's dance to the Tom Kruskal tune, the alternative to Sapphire Sea. It's a wonderful dance. I haven't learned how to teach it yet. I've taught it 4 or 5 times, but I haven't quite learned how to teach it exactly right to make it as good as her video. So those are some of my favorites.
Those are wonderful dances. And I also like to always ask musicians, what's your favorite piece of music, or what piece of music, what ECD tune maybe, gives you just joy every time you play it?
Well, this might be a surprise. My favorite English dance tune is News from Tripoli. The dance isn't so great. It's fairly ordinary, but the tune has a fluidity and a suppleness that none of the other tunes have. I'll play you a little bit of it. Those are some of the rules, by the way. Repeat something. If you've got a good idea, and vary it. I love this opening. It starts out it just kind of goes, wait, what, who? So yeah, it's, I have to say that News from Tripoli, but then there are all those great Elizabeth by Colin Hume and all the Jonathan Jensen tunes, and Orley's written some beauties, Longevity and Safe Haven, and Chris and Brooke have written some great tunes. So, but I think my all-time favorite is News from Tripoli. Yeah.
We are blessed. Thank you. That was great. Thank you so much for being with us. And
You're
as
welcome.
you can tell, we have lots to talk about in the after talk. So please make sure you join us. Our Larry and Renee are going to be posting the link to the after chat in the chat boxes. So make sure you open up and look in there.
But first, you do listen to Judy Collins singing The Patriot Game so you can hear Paul Prestopino.
Well, we will absolutely be doing that, but I have a couple of wrap-up things
yeah.
first.
Of course, I know you do.
Great piece of music. I'm looking forward to hearing it. I wanted to let you know, once again, the video that we played, there's a wonderful compilation project done by Mitch Diamond, David Covenant, Jan Elliott, Brad Saylor, the CDS Boston Center, and we're posting again where you can get that, because last time there was talk about that. We didn't know where exactly, and now we do. So thank you, Jean, for coming and being our guest. Finally, you're lucky number 33. So I'm very thrilled about that. Our 5 Things team, Lindsay Verbal in the background, Renee Turner on Zoom, who we've loved having with us, and Larry Hansen on Facebook, along with our helpers, Reed Wilson, Kara King, Linda Nelson, and Dan Vilter, who's been coming on board and lending a hand. So thank you, thank you. Colin Hume, he maintains an accessible index of all our web chats on his website in one place. So thank you, Colin. You can go and check out all of them. And I have to say, I get a lot of people saying, oh, please, would you have Joanna Reiner on? Or, oh, please have Sharon Green on. And those web chats are already there. So please go and check that list. We're posting it in the chat box. Thank you so much to everybody who's been sending in donations to our group to help support this web chat and all the different web classes we're doing online. There are operating expenses, and it's been a blessing. Thank you. We really appreciate it. Coming up this week and next, coming next Tuesday is David Smuckler. So we're really thrilled to have him. Registration is open. I'm not going to read the paragraph. You can read it for yourself, and you'll be getting the posts if you're on our mailing list. This Saturday, I have to talk about this. Our 3rd Saturday Historical Dance Web Chat, this Saturday, October 17th, it's Walter Nelson. He has participated in hundreds of living history and dance programs covering eras from the Middle Ages to the Second World War. He's organized events, balls that sell out like that. I mean, really, 5 minutes. It's harder ticket than Comic-Con. You definitely want to tune in. He's responsible for our group being in existence because we wanted to be able to practice these dances on these balls, and he is directly responsible for thousands of new people coming in and dancing historical dance. So please don't miss it. It's this Saturday. It's 10 a.m. Pacific. He's a great speaker. A lot of you probably have heard him already. So I want to make sure you all know about that. He's really good. He's really wonderful. So I hope we see you then. And I'm just going to go into the donations. Jean recommends, of course, you donate to the Country Dance and Song Society and become a member, like most all of us are. The donation link is being posted. The exit music is, of course, the Patriot Game. And we are posting the credits for that. We'll see you all in about 2 minutes or so. As soon as the song fades away, we will be opening up the after talk. And it's been great having everybody here. Thank you, and looking forward to a lot more conversation in just a few minutes. Bye.